Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone tonight on behalf of the Maine Department of Transportation to be here for a public meeting. Yes. My name is Doug Coombs. I'm a senior project manager for the Maine Department of Transportation in Region 2, the Mid-Coast region. And we're here tonight to have a meeting on win number 21771.00. That is a drainage project through the region, Mid-Coast region, and also win number 23539.00, which is a multimodal project involving this sidewalk replacement. First off, what I'd like to do is introduce some of the people here that are from the Maine DOT tonight. First off, I've got Arel Gorno. He is the Senior Project Manager for Multimodal for this project. I also have Tom Stevens. Tom is the Construction PM for the Mid-Coast region, for Region 2. Also here, the designer of the project, Jay Baines. And I also have the right-of-way appraiser, Senior right-of-way appraiser, Luther Yonts here as well. First off, a couple housekeeping items just so that we get through here. Sign-up sheet is around. Please sign in. We have some notification items up here as well on the front desk. We basically have right-of-way booklets up here, an EO handout for that is important if you want to take a look at that. Also, my business cards are up here, and if you want them, you can take a comment card that in the self-addressed envelopes there as well that you can send in if you think of something afterwards, or don't want to really have anything to say right now. You can put that in there as well and send them back to me. Notices of this meeting is also up here. Those notices were sent to local officials, state representatives, and senators, budding property owners, and utilities within the project area. It was published in the newspaper and the Camden Herald as well, notice of the meeting. And I also would like to introduce our court reporter, Robin Dostey. Robin will be taking notes for the meeting and developing a transcript for it. So when you're addressing us up here, if you have a question or a comment, please stand up, state your name, and speak clearly so Robin can get everything down properly. We would like to, tonight if we could, kind of go through our presentation here and then end with questions and comments at the end. That way it makes it a little easier for Robin trying to keep track of who's speaking and making sure there's a good record of what we're doing. Reasons for the public meeting are to show the town and the townspeople and people that are impacted by the project the intent and scope of the project, and also give the public a chance and opportunity to ask questions and find out more about the project itself. And we're here to hear what you have to say, and we can take a look at that based upon our design and where we're going with the project. The agenda tonight is going to go pretty much, I'm going to talk a little bit about project history, purpose and need, and then we're going to move into the design phase. This is a relatively simple project, but there are a lot of people being impacted, obviously, by it. It's replacing infrastructure and in a tight area. A little on the project history I want to start with. The drainage project was first kicked off in 2017. That means it was given funding and started. It was primarily looking at drainage issues in the downtown section on Main Street and a little bit of Elm Street. And then basically what happened from there was more issues that came up with infrastructure. We started moving suddenly along Elm Street. And then at the same time, about the same time, our work plan indicated that we were actually doing work in the same area that there had been an anticipated sidewalk project at the same time. Obviously, replacing the infrastructure of all the drainage in those areas would impact the sidewalks. So the highway program manager and the multimodal project manager got Arel and I together to see if we couldn't get some synergy in these projects and work together so that both of these items could be taken care of at the same time. Purpose and need. We actually had a contractor come down and they do video work and clean catch basins and things like that, and actually did a video survey of the drainage in the area and looked at the possibility of what needed to be replaced or what could be possibly rehabbed as part of the project. That was our first step to see. Then, of course, we've since then done survey work and whatnot, and the scope of the project has increased. We had videoed quite a bit of the project, hoping that some of it would be better than others, and we found some issues in other places. So we've expanded the scope of the drainage project. That kind of gives you an idea of where we are at this point. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jay and let him talk about the design. And Arel and I can kick in and add a little bit here and there if we need to. All right? All set, Jay?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Just to give you the basic idea of where exactly, can you pick that up?
Is it on green?
Yep. You good? Wonderful. Really want to hold it and walk around with it, like I'm cutting a promo or something, but I kind of pace when I talk anyway. So basically, initially, like Doug mentioned, the drainage project was really concentrated on Main Street. Basically, if you take the five-way, as we call it down here, between that and the bridge was the original concentration of the drainage project. When we looked at more existing conditions, that's when we extended southerly up Elm Street to the point where we're going all the way to the intersection with Union Street. And that expansion came in when we went together with multimodal. So there's, as you can see, so basically it's not that long. It's only about a quarter of a mile, actually. But that just shows you the basic overview of where we're working right here. Existing conditions, like we've said, drainage replacement. We're starting at, the actual replacement of drainage starts about 200 feet north of that intersection at Union Street. That last structure that we'll tie in, or we'll replace, and then we work the drainage system going down downtown. Basically, the existing conditions, a lot of these existing drainage structures are old brick basins. Typically they're square basins, about 24 inches square. And most of the pipe underneath the road, 18-inch metal pipe, over the years, it's just deteriorated, if it hasn't collapsed already. Then with the sidewalk, especially on the easterly side, we're dealing with a mix of concrete sidewalk, with granite curb or asphalt curb, etc. Whole mix of different things, and we really want to make that consistent, and also to match the sidewalk that was replaced on the west side of the road, try to make that a little more symmetrical in a sense. Guardrail, there is none on this segment. Usually, most highway projects we are dealing with guardrail. Fortunately, not in this case because we're in town. Basic corridor information, what we're dealing with. This is a corridor priority 1 road. What that means, basically, the way the department defines that is interstate, Route 1, Route 2, I believe, going out Western Maine, and the airline, which is Route 9 going between Bangor and Calais. That's all corridor priority 1 roadway. Speed limit down through the downtown, of course, is 25 miles an hour. A little slower than that once we get into season in a few weeks. Current traffic, we're dealing with about 12,300 cars a day. Projected about 13,000, just over 13,000 by 2032. That's a projected number that we use. Accident data, we have no high crash locations on Route 1. The one exception, it's technically not on Route 1, but on Chestnut Street, because on that one-way road, when the cars are backing back out into traffic with the diagonal parking, that's where we're getting a lot of accidents, or crashes, I should say, there, but it's not specific on Route 1 in itself. Lane and shoulder width. When you look at the overview, you'd think this stretch of Elm Street is straight. It's not 100% straight through the right-of-way. So there is a section that does narrow up as narrow as 36.5 feet. Of course, and then it widens up to about 52 feet once we get closer to the 5-way intersection, closer to downtown. Proposed drainage. Picture up here is the current outfall. Goes right underneath that building, about 24 inches wide in diameter. Goes right down underneath on the downstream side of that dam in the river right there. But that's the outfall currently. When we're sizing this and we're designing this for the newer system, we need at least 36 inches. So it's completely undersized as currently states. Also going underneath the building, not exactly the best design in itself. So what we want to do with the drainage is basically we'll take the outfall, and the plan currently is put a new 36-inch pipe down the alleyway, the harbor walkway, right through that corridor. Basically, once we get to the bottom of the parking lot, take a 90, and then we dump right into the harbor from right there. But the proper size pipe. Because of that, we're kind of changing the location of the outfall. We do have to change the direction of the flow in some of these locations, but all of the drainage on that right side of the road will be replaced. New structures, new pipes, etc. So we're able to account for changing the flow path by doing that. On the left side of the road, on the west side, this side of the street, there are a couple basins that we do have to rehabilitate, mostly because the brick basins in itself, we can basically build them back up to grade properly, and but the base of the structure and the pipe in itself is in decent enough shape that we don't have to completely replace it. Also, the pipe on that west side of the road, we can actually slip line without excavating through. So we're choosing to do that to avoid disruptions that way.
Just to explain what a slip line,
Yeah.
a slip line is, basically there's different methods of doing that, but some it's a folded up piece of material that goes in, and then it's pushed out, blown out, and there's grout that goes in, and there's actual other systems where they grout inside of the pipe as well. That we'll be specifying that we want it slip lined, and we may be specific on what type that we use, but it won't be proprietary, and we may look at different systems that are offered up to do that. So in other words, the existing pipe will remain, and will basically line the inside of that pipe. So that's and the same procedure can happen a little bit, obviously different configuration for the catch basins themselves. So that what it does in this case, it allows us to be able to not have to dig across Route 1 in the middle of town. That's what we're hoping. One of the big things about this is the condition of these pipes get worse all the time. So we're trying as quickly as possible to get in here because the condition of the pipe now that is such that we can do that. If we wait and wait and wait, the condition of the pipe could get more deteriorated and worse and be an issue where we'd have to excavate in the middle of the street. Okay?
Yep. Obviously, when you go through and you excavate, you got to replace what's currently there. So with the sidewalk on the east side of the road, what the town really wanted through their master plan and through the multimodal project was they really wanted to match what was currently existing on the other side of the road. So as currently proposed, we'll all granite curb, all reinforced concrete sidewalk, just as it is on the other side of the road. The way we have to do things now with the American Disabilities Act, we have to upgrade all of these pedestrian ramps at the end of on the end of the crosswalks. So while most of our sidewalk work is concentrated on the easterly side of the road, on the other side where the crosswalks are, we do have to upgrade with detectable warning fields, proper grade for the ramps coming back up. See? I'm Italian, I talk with my hands. So So we have to do that accordingly and match basically what we have on the east side of the road. We have to maintain a minimum with new construction, 5 feet minimum of the sidewalk. That actually widens out to about 10 feet wide in front of the village green. The reason because of that, we want to create, basically, we want to keep the current trench with the drainage. A lot of these structures aren't on the curb. With curbing and with the headers and the grates, we really want to line that up. And because the road's so wide, we're able to basically bump the curb out from where it currently is. It's narrowing up the road per se, but we want to keep that consistent. So the way we were able to design this is maintain a 14-foot travel lane. Currently, we range anywhere between 11 to about 17 feet, try to keep that consistent. Lay the curb consistent off center line. We can actually, the way the basins work, we can actually adjust it and rotate it. So it looks like all the basins are straight, but we're able to rotate exactly where that grate's going to be while keeping that curb straight. Because of that, we're able to widen the sidewalk in front of the village green, et cetera.
The actual tops, what we'll have is a cone that has a shape to it, where we can rotate that cone around, or a flat top and rotate it around on top to be able to achieve this. We don't really want to relocate the catch basins if possible, because we've got utilities and other things in those areas that could be conflicts. But we still want to try to get the best ARIS line that we can on the curb and keep it straight.
The other thing that we're proposed doing at the intersection of Mechanic Street, with the existing conditions of the crosswalks and being able to utilize the Harbor Walkway as a pedestrian way, we will actually bump out, what we call it a bump out, basically make the sidewalk a little wider with a new radius. So we'll reconfigure, and we'll show the plans in a minute. We'll reconfigure and move that crosswalk closer southerly to line that up with the Harbor Walkway, and basically have that wider area for more pedestrian use. That the opening there in that street and that crosswalk is about 85 or 90 feet wide currently. Typically, when we're that wide, we really want to narrow it up. Mostly for safety reasons. Obviously, it works out aligning everything and making so we have a little more continuous pedestrian path as well. We are moving another crosswalk, the one right down the road here in front of Rite Aid. That's a mid-block crosswalk. We have in our crosswalk policy, crosswalks can't be within 200 feet within each other. We have also the crosswalk right down here, and because it's a mid-block one, and we have Wood Street just down the road, about 75 feet, we'll relocate that crosswalk there. It's much better to have that crosswalk at an intersection than would in the middle, in a mid-block setting.
Are we supposed to wait until the end to ask questions?
Yes.
Yeah, please. Just to give you a general sense of what we're dealing with subsurface, this is just a typical section of what we would be doing. You can see, the variable width of the sidewalk. The sidewalk is on your right, looking at this. Basically, when we dig through the road, we'll take a saw cut and try not to disturb the road as much as possible. Make that saw cut about 4 feet off proposed curb. Dig that trench. Put in the 18-inch under drain, which is what we'd be using on that side of the road, and then build up from there. The variable widths and the variable grades allows us to really play with and match into the existing conditions as best as possible, and establishing that range from a technical standpoint allows us to do that. So, and I'm going to try to zoom in here as well. So This is where we're starting here on Union Street. That corner where that big tree is, that's where we would go and match. These are not totally updated plans because we are continuing that sidewalk down around Union Street on the other side of the school and wrapping around there. So these aren't the current plans as stated.
We just added that. as well.
That's a brand new addition the past week or so.
So it's about another 100 feet down to that next.
We're also waiting for formal survey data to really actually draw that accurately. You can see the location of the basins. Those are the black squares. If you can see, it's a raster image, so it's not going to totally show effectively.
What's the hash line?
That's the saw cut line. That's how we show where exactly we're cutting the pavement. Yes.
Black line is the drainage?
The black line, that is curb that you can see. Yes, that black, it looks somewhat white dotted. That's how we donate.
Yes,
Yeah, that's how we show curb.
I see the dots.
Yep. So looking down here, same thing. Here's Wood Street, that opening. We will be closing up that entrance to that business right there per our driveway policy.
One thing I want you to know, while we're looking at this particular area, you can see that at how the road narrows up there. If you look at the light image, just above station 1400, see that number 1400 there?
Yeah.
You see how the other side of the street is that lighter area up there, that's what the curb is. You can see how that, right in that particular spot, it starts to get tight. We're going to address that as we go on, but I want you to take a close look at that now while that plan's up here. Okay?
Because that really impacts exactly what we can have on street in regards to parking. Let's go to the next page, further down, closer to downtown. Same area, kind of focus on the five-way right here. This is obviously where it gets a little busier. A lot busier, actually. And this shows exactly, we come right down with that outfall pipe right down the alleyway to the parking lot, and then we take that 90 and we dump right into the harbor. Also, if you notice here, wish I could zoom in and also highlight this at the same time. Hold on. Right here. This is what I was talking about exactly, where we have that bump out. Let me try to clear this. Will that clear? No. That worked. I like that. You can faintly see where that existing edge of sidewalk is. We will bump that right out. Allows us a little more space. The master plan had a lot more of these bump outs. We had concerns mostly from Public Works. They're very difficult to maintain in regards to plowing. When you have plows coming right down curb line, then you have to come back in. When you have a radius like this, that's a little easier to navigate with a plow.
Did you say there was one at Chestnut too?
Yes, right down, let me see if I can do this. We'll circle that right there.
Not as big about that.
Not, whoa. There we go.
All right, under control.
Is this online somewhere? If we wanted to follow along on a.
Being taped?
Yep.
No, the
plans
plans, so she can see
online.
it. So she can see
No,
No.
not right now.
it. Yeah, so it's really
It's
similar.
really hard to see.
Yep.
It's really similar to what's there.
It does bump that out slightly, mostly because we want to come in and back. We don't really want to change, because that's a town way. So we don't have the jurisdiction really to make that modification on Chestnut Street in regards to the parking.
We do have a full set of plans up
here.
front here that you can look at.
Yep.
Would they be less?
Yes.
Yep.
It's just really hard to know what you're talking about when you're seeing this for the first time, trying to.
Yep. No, I understand.
You have a laser pointer?
I do not.
We have one somewhere, right?
that. How much is the or the space between French and Braun and the new bump out? How much is that narrowing that opening there? Is it 5 feet, just to give us an idea? The bump out narrows the opening
Yes.
on Mechanic Street.
On Mechanic Street, approximately 12 to 15 feet.
So is there a line like this that is the existing and then you're coming out like that?
Yes. It's easy to, I have the full plan set up here and also the proposed striping plan in regards to the crosswalks. That's right up here and I'll be glad to walk you through that as well.
I'm not interfering.
While we're waiting, could folks state your names that spoke so that Robin can capture them?
Yeah.
Actually, anybody speaking in here should use one of the microphones.
Here's an additional pass around microphone.
Whoop, thank you.
You can also use the hook pointer and just point in the corner, in the left corner.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Upper right.
You have a mechanical way.
I'll do it.
You want a point? Okay. Where do you want to start?
All right, the area, go ahead, Jay.
All right, so right up there, that's the area in Mechanic Street. So very faintly, that existing, that's the existing edge of, or where the curb is currently. So, and obviously the thick black line, that dotted black line, that would be the proposed new curb. Yep. And similar, same thing with Chestnut Street right there. For more technical, not to get overly technical, but also with ADA, we do need the proper amount of space to put in these pedestrian ramps, and actually bumping out helps with that from a design standpoint. And we do want to keep the existing back of curb, so we're not disturbing lawns, etc.
Jay, you want to go, let's run through the drainage portion.
Yep.
If you would, please.
Yep.
Let's see. Okay. The dark.
Yep. So it's same thing. That dark line, as you can see right there, that would be the outfall right there. That's we put a manhole or structure right there to change directions with a pipe. We come right straight down that alleyway.
Piping, new piping on this side?
Yep. All new piping on that side. Mostly because we do have to change the direction of flow in that stretch right there. Currently, it does flow down with the outfall. The outfall currently, if you go that top basin, Doug, right there, yes, right there, that's currently where the current outfall is. So it goes from the location of that structure underneath the building into the river there. That dictates where exactly we will be slip lining, putting that liner is to rehabilitate the pipe across the road. Again, we want to do that so we don't, so we're not disturbing Route 1 and totally cutting through. And same thing, the existing conditions of those pipes, we are able to do the same thing, as well as rehabilitate those structures. We would replace the structure, that catch basin right there, in the area of the bump out. The condition of that is to the point where, we can't rehabilitate it.
Jeff Scott, can you say, are you redoing the surface of the alley there then?
We would match.
That's what it looks like.
Yes, so we would match the existing grade of that. Same thing with ADA. To totally upgrade it is difficult because of the grade of it. Exactly. So in order for us to go through there, we have to match what's existing. Match the existing conditions, and that allows us to excavate and put the pipe in.
Deb Dodge, I have more questions about the
Yeah.
harbor walkway. Do you want me to hold them till the very end?
Yes, please.
Yep.
All right.
So as we go through here, with construction, to address the disturbance that would be involved with construction, we would have to shift traffic. A lot of these types of projects where we're coming through an in-town section, we might be able to reduce down to 1 lane. Because there's no feasible detour through Camden, we have to maintain the 2 lanes of traffic. So what we would propose, and let me reiterate, traffic control plans are determined by the contractor itself. We approve them, but it's up to the contractor exactly what they're going to do. We establish, we need to, for example, you need to maintain 2 12-foot lanes, for example, which is what we would do in this case. And then the contractor in itself would set up the lane shift, etc. We would try to do this in segments, in phases, not to disturb and take out all the parking downtown. So probably, we'd try to do things like from Mechanic Street northward. We would do that one segment. Same thing, going between, Chestnut Street and Wood Street, we'd do that segment. And similarly, the area between Union Street and Wood Street, where it's so narrow, we're getting down to about 36 feet, curb to curb. That may have to go nights, for example, just because to maintain traffic and maintain, a feasible path and a feasible work zone. It would be more, cones and barrels and being able to get through that section. We may have to go nights, potentially.
So basically, the on-street parking in the areas of the work zone, there's not going to be any during the construction, because we have to keep the 2 lanes running. There'll be concrete barriers up probably in the in-town sections. Once you start up Elm Street, maybe we might be able to get away from the concrete barriers to a degree up there and just cone areas off. We'll maintain pedestrian traffic at all times. It will be reduced, though, down to probably 3 feet wide right in town. And Jay's got some slides on that. We'll talk about that. But everybody needs to know that when you do one of these projects, especially in-town ones, it's almost like renovating your house and living in it at the same time.
Can you clarify the dates that you're doing this?
Yeah, we'll talk about
Yep.
schedule.
And when Doug mentions the 3 feet, that's only, right in that in-town section right there. In the areas, south of Camden National Bank and Chestnut Street, because we were going from, asphalt to concrete, we wouldn't be able to totally maintain that at times. So we would detour you around, basically. The pedestrians would have to, think of the crew kind of moving up the road, and that's where that road's closed, but you can move, basically around it. Last summer, I was down in Hollowell with a reconstruction project down there, and that was dealing with pedestrians and traffic control was a huge priority, especially in that in-town section down in Hollowell. And that was a total reconstruction with the road as well. So these are things that the contractors in the department are very used to, and being able to make sure everyone can move accordingly is the #1 priority. So going with the sidewalk barriers, again, how it's actually done is determined by the contractor. We approve it. So just to give a few examples, when you're looking at a major city, when they're doing building construction, what they'll do is they'll either have like that canopy so things aren't falling on top of the sidewalk, so it looks like you're kind of walking through a tunnel on the street. Obviously, that wouldn't be necessary here. Or they would try to establish or channel pedestrians, I guess, more in the street. We wouldn't do that here. We'd try to maintain the sidewalk as best as possible. But just to give a few options, whether it's the fencing, basically we have this wood frame safety fence there, 42 inches high. That's another option. Or we have the plastic barriers. Basically, it's up to the contractor in making sure that they are able to maintain that 3 feet, as well as having enough room for them to work as well. So it's their preference. Obviously, something a little narrower benefits everyone. And again, it's up to the contractor to determine what they use.
In town, kind of envision being able to, if you look at the sidewalk down there, there's a construction joint in the middle of the sidewalk. Probably maintaining that construction joint where it is, sliding over about a foot or so from that toward the roadway, cutting a line down through there and establishing something for a fence line down that side. And then, of course, out on the roadside, that would be all concrete barriers. So trying to keep people separated where you probably have a fence that looks something similar to that, at least 42 inches high, plus a little bit above that, to keep people from getting into the excavation area. But at the same time, being able to maintain being able to enter all the businesses down there and whatnot.
Budget and schedule.
Schedule. That is me. Currently, the project is funded with all state and local funds. The current estimate for the project, including preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisition, construction, and construction engineering is $1,168,000. Wanted to know about schedule. We're looking at, right now, hopefully we can advertise for bid in the second quarter of 2020. Construction begin in the third quarter of 2020 with no work between Memorial Day and Labor Day during the summer rush period. That's what we're looking at right now. It would be a tight schedule for the contractor in some ways, but it's the best period of time to try to get down here and do that kind of work. Luckily, it's relatively small areas, and like Jay was talking about, be more segmented and phased as much as possible. Obviously, the outfall pipe is a challenge. There's bedrock almost at the top of the ground where we're going through down there. Right now, talking with our construction folks and back and forth, obviously blasting's kind of out of the realm. But what basically would happen in that area is probably a contractor would drill a series of holes, make it almost like Swiss cheese, and then go down there with some type of hydraulic hammer on an excavator and break the rock and take it out. That's, as you can imagine, that's a slow process, but it's also a process that can be done during the wintertime because it doesn't matter whether it's cold or hot. You can drill down that rock. The rock's not going to freeze. So that's what we're looking at in that particular area. All right, next. All right. Questions and comments. We have a couple questions that we want to ask off the bat, kind of get the thing started if we can. Has the Harbor parking lot ever flooded? And anybody's, yes.
Not much.
Well, as it's come up,
We're in the section now. Please stand, state your name and
yeah, this one? Yeah, Rick Seibel, Camden Public Works Director. Yes, the harbor parking lot down there has flooded on extremely high tides, unusual full moon conditions and everything, and storm surges. I would say, I think the furthest I've seen it is, I'm trying to think of something I can go by, the pump station, the sewer pump station that's down there, probably going towards the water, I would say roughly 25, 30 feet from there. So, not very high, but that slopes up. No, not that I know of. Where you have that catch basin located down there at the 90, I don't think it would get that far, but it depends on what they change for elevations there and everything.
right. The outfall would be submerged at that point. So, that's something we have to consider a little bit. But I would imagine now there may be issues with that as well, and it probably just short circuits and goes down Commercial Street and out when there isn't flow in that area. I'm not sure if it gets up to underneath that building or not. It probably doesn't get that high.
No, I don't believe it does. I'll never look at that.
That's
Now,
something
what
we
size
need to
catch
consider.
basin are you putting in at that 90?
The 90's got 2 3-footers going out of it, so it's probably going to end up being a 5-foot diameter, I would imagine, at a minimum, maybe a 6, but a 5.
We have the same condition at the bottom of Fry Street down on Bayview Street where our outfall goes right into the harbor. And we put in a 10-foot diameter catch basin there to help with storm surge because there's a brook running down into that. So I don't know, you might want to, if you
Consider
think
that.
that's going to, we've never had a problem with it since we've done that. So
Good, thank you, that's great
it
information.
might be something to consider. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Now, second question, if we could, is any major events, parades, things like that during, from the time in the October to May during the winter time, fall, winter, early spring?
We do have major events. One of my questions in looking at this is I'd be interested to see if our shopkeepers get more business in the fall leaf season than they do in May and June. I think our summer season really starts strong in beginning of July. And so sort of concerned about nothing from Memorial Day to Labor Day, but after Labor Day almost through November, and the leaf season is maybe some of our busiest time. And we also have a huge winter event, Winterfest in February, which ties into the toboggan national races out at the Snow Bowl, and there are a lot of people in town. I don't know how much work you'll be doing in February, but
If we move,
Christmas by the Sea is a big event downtown.
Parade.
Yeah, we do have a parade, usually around December 4th, December 5th, that goes through the downtown. All the shops stay open until 10 o'clock at night. And that weekend is very busy. So there are some big events.
that's good information because, typically, the period of time that we have up there is when we typically think of, a work window for us. And if we could adjust that and go more into the summer, that helps us paving and placing concrete and doing those kind of things, where the winter may be something that would really help us out construction wise, like I was saying, in the area where we're going to have to remove the bedrock and things like that.
Jeff Scott, I just thought of something else, Mark, when you said that. We have a lot of buses in the fall, tour buses that park. They let people off right where you're not going to let them off, at the Village Green.
Village Green.
That's where they let them off.
And that's where there's a bus parking spot there right now?
Yeah, it's like a hashed out area right at the Village Green. So it's just something, there are a lot, like 2 or 3 at a time.
How long does that go, I guess?
It really ends, I think it ends at the end of October, or a little before that, like the 20th.
Certainly Columbus Day.
Yeah,
That's when I start seeing it start to drop off after that. It depends on season. You get a lot of rain.
I think
Okay,
Columbus,
well, one thing, we got to make sure we do one at a time for Robin here. That's important.
I'm Mark Ruttenberg, again, Camden Select Board. Columbus Day is, everybody stays open through Columbus Day, and then businesses start to shut down after that, although some stay open through Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving is when it really starts to quiet down, with the exception of the Christmas by the Sea.
So if there was, I mean, sometimes we always like to start at the low point with these drainage projects and work uphill. But I mean, that may be something that we could think about in other areas where maybe something not so invasive could go on, and then maybe move into the area that's more downtown or something like that. But yeah, those are all things that we need to consider as part of this project.
Deb Dodge, one of the thoughts is we could bring the buses around onto Mechanic Street, near where the Mechanic Street parking lot is, which is in the heart of town. We could bring the buses around the back.
I'm not thinking of the park, I'm thinking of the people.
Well, I know the people, but if you're letting them off at Mechanic Street, it's still close. We're not talking about letting them off, way up at the Montessori School. We could bring them around by F&B to the Mechanic Street parking lot at F&B.
Oh, that's the one.
This one, right over here, right in the heart of town. I think the town could work on some solutions.
Okay. Do you have no?
One more comment is, how long will this all take? I haven't seen that on the.
We figure it's going to take that entire duration that we're talking about. We need at least, depending on weather and how weather, it's approximately from, September through May. So it's about 6 months, 5-6 months. But there'll be delay in there when weather is bad. So.
I would just think, I wonder if maybe a better time would be, I guess you can't start in winter, but April, May, June seems to be a less time, better time for us than the fall season, because that's a huge, important part of our town.
Okay, that's good to know. That's why we're here.
May I? Thank you.
That's my impression.
Jenna Lookner, Camden Select Board. I grew up in a very busy downtown restaurant, the Waterfront, and I have to say, with all respect to Mark, that I would say May 15th would have to be the cutoff. There is no way business down. April, totally, I think is fine, but I think if we get into June, we're really pushing it. I agree wholeheartedly with some of the assertions about the fall time frame. I think pushing back into October is a really smart suggestion on Mark's part, and I do think we could get into sort of the beginning of May, but I think after that, you're really looking at a lot of visitors in town and a lot going on, and also graduations and baccalaureates and marches downtown and different things. So that would be my input.
I don't know if people have been kind of tracking what's going on currently with construction prices and whatnot, but one of the big issues that have been brought up by industry people when we see prices coming in extremely high, and I think, I understand you folks have been experiencing it with some building projects, and certainly at the DOT, we've been experiencing it a lot with paving projects, bridge projects, and reconstruction projects. One of the things that have been coming back to us as part of the issue is actually timing of projects, having to do things on short durations and the amount of time it takes. I think everybody feels the pain of that, but we really need to take a look at, being able to get people around, if we still can get them around somehow, and being able to give them time enough to be able to do the projects. Yeah, I know it's a trade-off, and it goes back to the thing that I was talking about trying to renovate inside your house and live there at the same time. That's what these projects do. Any one of the in-town projects are that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit to what Doug said.
you have to consider the fact that we have to do concrete sidewalks. That's going to be one of the last items the contractor's going to do. If we start in the fall with the excavation, do all the drainage through the winter, at best case, they're going to start laying curb in April and compacting that, and then starting to, do the paving and the shoulders, and then they're going to start doing the concrete sidewalks, which is a slow process compared to paving sidewalks. And maybe we'll consider, the whole, every issue, obviously, but I just want to point out that, the contractor can start downtown and maybe get the downtown section up past, I forget the street names, but up past first intersection there, the 5-way. Maybe get that done by early May and save the up Elm Street part of the sidewalks for later in, but it may be later in May. So just.
The other thing too I'd like to add is concrete and pavement are temperature sensitive products. They're temperature sensitive products, so we can't lay those products down unless we get 40, 50 degrees. So we're kind of pigeonholed in somewhat too that in order to get a good product, we also need some temperatures with those types of materials.
And with the concrete sidewalks, we can add heat, of course, to get those to cure, but that's all added expense every time we do something like that.
Anita Brosius Scott, I was looking at the cut on the paved part of the road that you'll be doing near the curb. So my understanding is that you're really not going to have to dig up a lot of the paved Route 1, the traveled Route 1, but you are digging a fair amount. I wasn't clear on how much of the sidewalk you have to excavate, the existing sidewalk.
Basically, all the sidewalk will be gone and be completely removed. Jay, could you go back to that slide of the typical, please? Okay. We're looking at about 4 feet. It may be a little wider than that, but that 4 feet to 5 feet is going to they'll have to get a trench box in this area to actually work. So that's going to be out into the existing sidewalk quite a bit and some into the shoulder area. So basically the sidewalk will be completely removed and we'll be out into the shoulder area with the construction.
Another question, this is a little risky question, and it's really actually probably directed to Rick and Audra, is whether, I don't know whether Tannery Lane is truly a public way or whether that could have a one-way detour, for one part of the traffic, say coming from the north. I don't know, it was just trying to look at a creative solution, but it's got other complications.
We have looked at detours, and I actually rode around before the meeting a little bit and drove around thinking, that's what we did in the city of Hollowell. Obviously, there was one-way traffic there. We shipped them down one street because we had two really good parallel streets. I did ride around here a little bit tonight before the meeting this afternoon, and I think there's some challenges there to trying to detour traffic. The streets are very narrow and residential, and you're talking tractor trailers and big trucks and things like that. So I think there's some real challenges with that. That's why we want to try to maintain 2 lanes of traffic out there at all times. It will be tight, but I think that's a better alternative for this project.
Pauline Johnstone, how were you proposing to deal with the narrow section of Elm Street?
That was the section that Jay was talking about that would probably have to be done at night because it's going to have to go down to one lane of traffic. There's no way that we can keep 2 lanes of traffic going in that area and be able to have 22 feet, 11 feet for each travel lane. So there'd be a section that we'd require the contractor to do at night, and that would be that section. Luckily, it's a relatively short section, which is good. But that area gets very, 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 very tight. That, I didn't have this before, wish I did, but that's the area where it narrows right up. And Jay talked a little bit about parking spaces there and whatnot. Those are very narrow. And I know we've talked to the town a little bit about those areas. The town paints those. And they are very narrow. And, you know, a truck parked there, like a pickup truck with West Coast mirrors, far out mirrors on it, sticking out a long way. So we've kind of talked about possibly compact cars in that area or something like that.
Okay, so will you be widening the width of the road at all?
No. We would,
There are a lot of side view mirrors that end up on the pavement there.
we would maintain the location of the curb and the existing conditions on the west side of the road. And I know in that area, and one of the times when I actually came down here, it was at about 7 in the morning, and I parked in that really thin area, that really narrow area, and then I took the tape and I got about 6 feet 8 inches. And I have a little compact Sentra, and I felt, you know, nervous with no traffic on the road opening my driver's side door. So, typically, a parking stall would be 8 feet, you know, your typical 8-foot shoulder. And the narrowest we'll have a lane would be 11. So when you have 2 11s plus 2 8s, you're at 38 feet. That narrowest section is 36.5, just for some frame of reference.
We got one gentleman back there, I think it was.
Andrew Stanchoff. In the original concept sketches, they show a lot of greenery, trees and shrubs being planted all through this area. Do these drawings take any of that into account?
These drawings do not, mostly because, you know, the design portion of this project started exclusively with the drainage, and then we would maintain and put back what was existing when we lumped in the sidewalk in itself, because it tied in together. That's when we expanded upon the sidewalk. When going through from a design perspective, from a designer's perspective, I was given that master plan as a frame of reference, exactly what we were trying to do. And I was given that by the town. But this project in itself would not involve the greenery and the beautification aspects of that master plan.
That's currently not in the budget.
Because wouldn't all that have to be built in? I mean, you have to leave holes in the sidewalks or whatever to put trees and shrubs and
Yes.
soil in.
Yep.
So if that's still in the budget or in the plan, or is it not? I don't know.
Not in this project.
So it would probably never happen then, right?
We can take a look at that, and if the town specifically wanted some of that, the issues with that is if you're leaving a spot like that in the sidewalk, it does become a hazard, so you have to put something in relatively quickly or do something so somebody don't, you know, trip on it or fall or do something like that.
Well, Deb Dodge, I'm co-chair of the Camden's Downtown Design Team. While we're on this section of Elm Street, you mentioned that you were moving the sidewalk to Wood Street because you prefer to have, crosswalks, thanks, crosswalks
Yes.
at intersections.
Yes.
If you spend any time in that section of Camden, you know that the crosswalk, which is by Rite Aid, is used a lot.
Yes.
People park on the opposite side of Rite Aid, and where are they going? 80% of them are going to Rite Aid. Concern is you're moving it 75 feet south. It'll be opposite Camden Real Estate, which then they'll have to cross sort of 2 driveways to get to Rite Aid. People are still going to park closer to Rite Aid and cross at Rite Aid, whether you've got a crosswalk there or not. And I'm concerned that we're creating a hazard and you'll have a crosswalk that isn't really being used, and we'll have people jaywalking down by Rite Aid. So I think it would be really important to do what you can to keep that sidewalk as close to Rite Aid as you can, move it down to the other side of Wood Street, or else we really won't have people using it.
Thank you.
That's a lot.
We,
Your name, please?
Allison McKellar.
Thank you.
Camden Select Board.
Thank you.
that's part of our crosswalk policy. Yes, policy. Our design policy and how we go, yeah. Yes, that's the terminology. And when it's within 200 feet, being able to move that to an intersection is preferred from a safety perspective.
Because it is going to force people then to have to cross over the Rite Aid driveway. Rite Aid Stone. Well, is it called a drive? The part in between to get to the Rite Aid parking lot.
To drive, yes.
So, I don't know. Is there any way you can just leave the crosswalk where it is?
Wait.
You ask every person in this room, they're all going to say it's safer where it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Than moving it. That's what they're going to say. Just take that into consideration.
I think what you will see is people, that's where it is now is sort of at the end of the business district. And if you move it up the street, people are going to start jaywalking across to get across to things. They're not going to walk back up the street and then back down again. It's the human nature.
Go through the Rite Aid exit more, because they're going to cross higher up and then have to cross then another. It's almost a road, that Rite Aid exit.
Rick Seibel, I'll concur with that, and people are doing it now. They don't even go to the crosswalk there. And while we're on crosswalks, I just wanted to bring up, we have, I think, 3 crosswalks outside the scope of the project. And they have, when you guys went through several years ago and redid the surface of the road, you coal-planed it and everything, we put in that brick pattern street print, and all that's worn off. Would we be able to get those last 3 crosswalks cold milled across there and just paved back over so we can just have a good surface and then that we can paint the crosswalks back in?
Yeah, we can take a look at that. Are you interested, do you want to get rid of that textured pavement, or?
Yes, what's there, it can't hold up in the traffic. It lasted
Just
anywhere from
wears-
3 to 5 years, and that was about it.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Okay.
Anita, Brucey Scott, would you be willing to address the corner where Union Street meets Elm Street and how the pedestrian way will be designed at that point? Presently, the actual pedestrian way is a curve around the outside of the tree that exists. It's a large tree that none of us want to lose. But the pedestrians prefer to walk between the tree and the Conway boulder, yes. So what are your plans? Because the diagonal, it makes the most sense in terms of use.
So, and we would do just that. We would basically thread the needle, and going off preliminary survey measurements that Doug and I took without a the formal survey data returned to us at this point, we are able to basically thread that needle with the appropriate 5-foot minimum width. And then we would basically come on along that back side of the tree to the existing asphalt sidewalk and match into there on
And
that
then
side of the school.
continuing towards Pleasant Street,
Yes.
that has been a consistent problem, as you're probably aware, with people parking, pulling right up over the sloped asphalt curb, and we'd like to, well, it's not really a curb, so I think in order to maintain safe pedestrian access, we need to make it harder for people to pull up onto that walkway. Are you planning to do a concrete
Concrete with granite, yep.
concrete and
Yes.
granite
Yes.
curbing there. Thank you.
Exactly. One thing I do want to point out, putting this across here as well is another hard surface over the roots of that tree that's there, which makes it a little bit even more vulnerable than what it is right now, because if you kind of look at, the canopy of that tree and assuming the canopy of that tree, you got roots out the same amount, a fair amount of that's under the pavement now, and then we'll turn around and put something on top of it. We agree that's the best place for that sidewalk to go, between the tree and the stone monument there is there. But that is certainly something that makes the tree more subjective to not being able to survive.
And with that concrete surface, the excavation and the base underneath that, it goes, that subgrade's going to be 14 inches underneath the proposed surface of that concrete sidewalk. We take the 10 inches of gravel, the concrete in itself is 4 inches thick.
Yeah, I was thinking.
It'd only be about 14 inches of excavation in itself,
Yeah.
but where the top of that roots lie, that's the biggest question.
Yeah, we tried to look at that and try to keep it up as high as we can, realistically.
Exactly.
We don't want to trap water in there. That's the other issue. The more you bring that sidewalk up, the more chances to trap water. And we looked, water tends to want to run, I think, around that monument kind of there, and then out across the lawn and things like that. So that's going to be a challenge in that area, because then we're even adding more soil. If we jack it up, it's adding more soil over the top of the tree, and so it's...
Jeff Scott, is that worse? That's what I was thinking, sort of turnpike it a little bit.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm pointing that out at this point.
Deb Dodge again. I don't know if this is possible, but have you thought about moving the boulder closer to the tree and putting the sidewalk behind the two of them?
Who is in charge of the boulder, I guess?
Town.
I guess is
Town would be.
Supposed to be a really big,
Well, it took a team of like 16 horses to pull the thing on the wagon to start with. But we have machines that are... was just a thought.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's worth considering. I just don't know at what point it becomes bad for the tree with the roots being compacted in a new way.
Yeah.
I think we definitely, how will final decisions about that area be made? I know, I'm sure there are a lot of tree lovers in town that will want to make sure everything is being done correctly. Thank you for being concerned.
I guess it's kind of up to the town. We'll consider whatever you guys want to consider. We can put a sidewalk about any place. It does impact the right-of-way acquisition if we move stuff around and whatnot, but we have got to take some rights in that area because and whatnot. But we'll listen to it. I mean, moving those kind of things. We have some money in the budget, obviously, like for equipment rental items and things like that. But it's a challenge to move a stone that big and not damage anything or anything like that.
We also don't want to put it too close to the
Right.
roadway.
Right.
I mean, the school system might be just happy to move their fence.
That's what I'm wondering about. I'm going to ask them.
Yeah.
Would the town consider decking like the plastic decking boards and actually decking across there? Like a boardwalk across that section? Then you don't have to excavate down.
I guess
Plow.
Rick might not like plowing it in the wintertime, but
He keeps saying.
Well, listen, I mean, it's a small area, but Arella's right. I mean, it makes me nervous putting something that large near the road. We got setback issues there with, clear zone and whatnot. Moving that there is, I realize the trees there too, which is in the clear zone, but that's just something else to consider.
So
Gentleman in the back.
Andrew Stanchoff. I keep going back to this original concept plan, and I'm just curious how that's working out with things that aren't in this plan that are in the concept plan. Seems like if you don't do them now, they may never happen. So like the original plan shows crosswalks going across Route 1 there from the Stop and Go gas station, and one going across over towards the Congo Church. Were those, how did that work, these decisions, and considering the original master concept sketch from about 7 years ago?
Those areas were kind of outside of the scope of where we were going, the limits of work, trying to stay within where we are now. Adding those on and addressing ramps in the two other places is more cost and would be certainly more money to do. So,
would it be up to the town to make those decisions? Deborah Dodge, you're on the committee there. Is that, I don't know, is it necessary?
We can recommend it, but either the town would probably have to work with, I would think, DOT on another project to get something like what we call it, the master plan calls that the Southern Gateway, not to be confused with DOT's Southern Gateway, to get those crosswalks there. I think that's another project.
Jeff Scott, just a couple of questions. You said something about the width of the sidewalk is going to, I got really confused about this, that the range of the width of the sidewalk would change a whole lot because you had more room to play with?
Yeah, so.
I didn't get that.
So let me get the proper image. Basically,
The sidewalk is always the same width, pretty much, or something.
Well, in this case, we want to keep the travel way the same width, and we really want to make sure that curb and the basins line up accordingly. So we establish where the curb is going to be in more of a straight line with the drainage to keep the travel way one consistent width. And by doing that, we're actually able to widen the sidewalk, holding that back edge of the sidewalk currently.
Oh.
So currently the variation is in the travel way.
Got it.
This way we're moving to the sidewalk, which is a little more advantageous, busier pedestrian way.
Jay, go to your section.
Yep.
Typical section. It shows it in the typical section, actually. Here's the new granite here. There's existing here. So it's widened out. This sidewalk would be widened in that particular area as where this typical section is. So in other words, we're trying to keep these lined up so the catch basins actually are running on the gutter lines, and then varying the sidewalk, holding the back edge of where the sidewalk is now. So then you get a varying width of the sidewalk itself.
Also, bearing on what Andrew was saying, moving to another question, you had talked about trying to reduce the distance across Route 1 to Mechanic Street by doing a little bump out there.
Yep.
But I think you're going southbound, also on Route 1, with the drainage, and you're going right underneath other areas that were recommended as having bump outs too, particularly across Chestnut. And I think you said you're reticent to do that because that's not a state road, Chestnut, and so you didn't want to do the bump out there, but what you're going to do is going to have to be redone.
Well, with Chestnut, to answer specifically to Chestnut Street here.
Yeah, the left red circle.
Yes. Circle.
It's a good circle.
It's not bad, freehand. Anyway, we would reduce that to bring to ADA standards and making sure that we have a clear path on the backside of that ramp so a chair can actually maneuver around and through. If, let's say, a chair want to come from Chestnut Street around that corner up Elm Street, they're able to do that without going into that ramp down to the crosswalk.
Right.
And with the angled parking there, we're actually able to bump that out and actually narrow that intersection. Not to the extent of going all the way down Chestnut Street, because that is a town way. And on the other side, with Camden National, and the presence of the heated sidewalk, which we were, as a department, were made aware of just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
Yeah.
section there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of heated sidewalk.
Yes.
One thing I want to point out, we did talk with the town on some of these bump out areas. And Jay did mention it when he was talking about, plowing issues around those. That's one consideration. The other consideration is the more you bump some of these out and make them larger, it's going to impact parking, on-street parking as well. Obviously, from the crosswalk areas, we're supposed to stay back 20 feet on those, which impacts overall number of parking spaces. So we won't be relining those with this project, but that is a consideration. And the more bump outs you have, the less on-street parking you're going to have, basically.
Basically,
Yeah.
with every time you put in a bump out, and we wouldn't, because the town has been currently striping the parking stalls, they would continue to do so. If we were to do that, we would be basically eliminating 4 parking spaces adjacent to each crosswalk on Route 1. We will not be doing that.
Currently. So the town marks them, but it is, and I've actually received some emails on this saying how unsafe it is for using a crosswalk someplace, that based on this project, people who can get here tonight sent me emails saying, you come out, cars are really close, can't really see, new SUVs are all high, people look like they're sneaking out around them. So that is a strong consideration, and it's a balancing act between the number of on-street parking that you have and those areas, but something to consider.
I know that the committee that helped design this spent a lot of time, and they're very, very invested in downtown parking. And yet they decided to propose this with the bump outs. Deb, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
You did it perfectly.
So it's shown here as having, the bump outs, and the bump outs, as you've said, reduce the amount of time that the pedestrians are out there, and it actually gives them a better vantage point to get to see past the parked cars, which you're recognizing on Mechanic Street there, which is great. And I know, Rick, it's harder. I do know it for plowing. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think overall, on balance, the bump outs would be I agree with the committee that came up with the design, that the bump outs on balance are a better decision than not to.
On the bump out, Rick Seibel, you may have to, one thing to consider with bump outs when they come out like that, you have to reconsider the drainage and locations of the catch basins, because the bump outs will stop the water from flowing to a catch basin if it's on the wrong side of the bump out. So they may have to add extra catch basins on either side of the bump outs that you want to propose. So that's something they'd have to look at too, which would increase the cost of the project. But
Deb Dodgigan, so the reason we're not doing a bump out on the end of Chestnut Street, I'm looking at a catch basin right by the Camden National Bank.
Yep.
So that is what Rick is referring to, that the placement of that catch basin precludes an extension of the sidewalk in that area? Is that what Rick was just saying?
In that's the area that, specifically with the heated sidewalk, to maintain that or not disturb that at all. We'll have to disturb it to put in the new structures for the basins, regardless.
Is the heated sidewalk in the town or state right-of-way? And is the heated sidewalk it isn't privately owned, is it?
Came to National Bank.
Owns the sidewalk?
No, they own it.
It's, it,
But is the heated sidewalk on Route 1 side or on the Chestnut Street side or both? Well, the Camden National Bank is on the corner,
On the Route 1 side, yes.
so it's not on the Chestnut Street side.
Right.
and it's within the right-of-way. And we have got people talking with Camden National Bank about that, because obviously, we're not, it would be up to them to get some type of license to allow that to be within our right-of-way. So that is being discussed right now.
More will be said about that later then, I guess.
Possibly.
Okay, possibly. Could I ask some questions about Harbor Walkway, or would you like to ask more about?
I just wanted, Andrew Stanchuk, speaking of bump outs and that sidewalk from Rite Aid, if that were maintained there, it seems like a great spot for a bump out on the Rite Aid side to cross over. But
I know specifically
Makes
when we're considering moving that, and part of the initial discussion was how much of that current existing sidewalk on the Rite Aid side was within our right-of-way itself. And in order to maintain and put in an appropriate pedestrian ramp, it wasn't feasible to do so going back from the curb to build that ramp. Now with the bump out, we're able to do that, just because we have enough room coming back from the curb, the proper grade. We have to maintain a 1 to 12 slope.
Again, we'd have to look at drainage in that area.
Absolutely.
That would, could
Because
be impacted.
as currently states, we aren't touching the drainage on that side of the road.
Would that be something you would do for us, though, because that position of that crosswalk
We can
is pretty important to most people in this community, I would say.
Yep, we'll take a look at that.
May I jump to Harbor Walkway?
Absolutely.
Can we go back to a crosswalk? I'm not sure what the process is for raising hands, and if we're just supposed to jump in, or?
No, are you more in the area that we're talking right now? With yours?
The crosswalk between French and Braun and Camden Custom Embroidery, and the 15-minute parking spots.
Right-hand circle.
Yep, right here. Yes.
See the big red circle?
Yeah.
Camden Embroidery.
Okay. It's hard for me to see, is that 15-minute parking spot going to be eliminated?
Yes.
Yes? I mean, that is like a one, that's not great. People love that parking spot. Can you go over the reasoning for that again?
Pedestrian safety primarily.
Narrowing that crosswalk, the strength, the length of what a pedestrian has to cross, that's a tough intersection if you're a pedestrian.
I mean, I know I am a pedestrian with
walking 3 lanes.
Kids all the time. I mean, I do see the issue. I just think that many people probably believe that the benefits outweigh the downfalls.
You could move the 15-minute spot to around the corner on Mechanic Street.
I mean, I just think that's possibly one of those things that to anybody who's a professional who designs these types of things, it makes all the sense in the world. But it's sort of like our Mechanic Street parking lot that we just went through this big thing with. Following all the correct design principles is not always popular with, the people who actually use it. And I tend to think that this might be one of those cases, but.
I think some of it too, wasn't it, with the ADA and giving them the ability to, particularly with a wheelchair, traverse that area as well, isn't it? With some of the bump out design considerations with the grades and the cross slopes and stuff.
Typically it is. That area I don't think is overly that bad. I think it was more to restrict that area lengthwise. in this case, right?
Well, yes and no, but mostly, actually, it kind of goes all the way back to the drainage and replacing that basin right there in place. And by doing so, that basin would be in the same location as currently. With that, with the proper header, with all the other considerations with ADA and everything, and being able to relocate a crosswalk directly into the harbor walkway, to have those 5 crosswalks, or actually 1, 2, 3, 4, at that 5-way, being able to tie in together onto that one intersection from a design perspective was more advantageous. When you deal with a basin near a crosswalk, that basin has to be 10 feet away from the edge of that crosswalk.
We have to slope
Appropriate
down.
grades.
Yeah.
Because we need 8 feet to tip down, and that header is 4 feet. The center of that, 2 feet. That's where you get your 10.
Yeah, so you can't cross right at the catch basin itself, so we have to move away from it. And why we have to have a piece of granite that angles down, a tip down, is to be able to get back down to the grade of the street. So in other words, we've got a curb that's up about 7 inches, so we have to get down at a 12-to-1 slope.
Yeah, I believe you. I'll admit, you've lost me a little bit.
But that's what's impacting that corner right there, and I think, you know, that's what Tom was talking about too, being able to get that ADA ramp in the right location is critical where the catch basin is too.
People with in wheelchairs particularly, and then you don't want to cross people with an open grate, with women with, high heel shoes or whatever. You don't want to have somebody to roll their ankle or injure themselves, get caught up in the openings of the drainage system.
There's not a catch basin there now?
Yes.
It's interesting, Jeff. It seems the safety benefits would far outweigh the loss of one parking space. I don't know the statistics, but I know one guy that got hit on that crosswalk.
And so the crosswalk will go from where to where?
Across Route 1?
No, across Mechanic.
Basically on that same line. Yep. So where it is now, it wouldn't be. So if you're walking,
Oh, but since there's
if you're
going to
crossing
be...
the street in that crosswalk now, it would be. It basically would still be there, but the edge of the curb would be further in the street to narrow up that opening in the street. But to channelize the pedestrians, that basically pathway would basically be in the same space.
And the idea is to try to get them to go down the harbor walkway? Did you say there was going to be an orientation difference, or
going across Route 1, because we have that crosswalk, that mid-block crosswalk, just further northerly, moving that into that harbor walkway area, in talking with the town and other designers, would be far more beneficial.
is it that harbor walkway, when you do all your drilling or not blasting, or is there any way to, it's so steep that, I mean,
I think we're up to harbor walkway.
Good transition.
Thanks, Allison. Good lead-in. One of the things the design team has spent a lot of time on is looking at that harbor walkway. It's problematic for a couple of reasons. Certainly the steepness of it, issues with down at the bottom of it, trucks backing up and using it is also one of the issues. But speaking to the steepness, there isn't any way to do any terracing at all to help reduce the steepness of that grade.
I had conversations with the town, and actually there was a consultant that was hired by the town to start looking into those issues, because that really wasn't part of the project at that time. We were just focused on drainage at that time. I know there was conversations with our folks, our ADA folks and whatnot. That is a very challenging location to be able to make ADA compliant, because you're looking at having to do something for switchbacks or this or that, and it's very narrow. to be able to do that.
As an alternative, can accommodations be made to have a railing go down, particularly beside the brick building where Lily Lupin is, in order to make it easier and safer for people who want to go down the harbor walkway? Because of the steepness, would accommodations for a railing, a handrail, be something that could be put into that project?
Possibly. We, being the DOT, want to leave that just the way it is, because if we start making changes there, there's no way that we can make it really compliant.
Can the town, are you telling me that the town could work with the DOT and get a railing installed if the town installed it on that harbor walkway?
I would think the town could do something like that.
Would the town or the DOT be able to make accommodations for future electricity down the walkway, for instance, bearing a conduit of some sort? So if light electricity wanted to be added to make it, to be able to light it at night, is that something that can be included in the design of the harbor walkway, so a conduit is there for future electrical use?
That's going to add more right-of-way impacts for that area. It's adding extra infrastructure in that area. Luther, do you want to say anything about that?
Where is she talking, where's?
Harbor walkway?
The alleyway there?
Yes, yes.
We call it a harbor walkway. We try not to call it an alley. But we know it is, but we're dressing it up.
That walkway is actually, to my understanding, owned by the Sea Dog.
We have a right-of-way.
And the town has a right-of-way. I have not read that to tell you what that right-of-way entails. We will need to do a drainage easement through there to put our pipe and further encumber it. So I would kind of suggest you check into your right-of-way to see what rights the town has to do something there.
Could you get the owners of the buildings to maybe volunteer and put some lights up there?
Well, that certainly is possible, but I'm actually more concerned about a railing even than the conduit.
So that would not be something that, if the DOT put it up, the DOT did it, now come in and fix it. We're doing a drainage easement there. So doing fences, doing railings is not something, ours is the traffic and the drainage. So if the town wanted to do that in that walkway and be responsible for it, that's not going to affect our drainage pipe under the ground.
Okay.
Are we still in harbor walkway, or are we?
Yeah, harbor walkway, or I think we're done with that if you want to move to another area.
Did you say, Deb, that you have more on the harbor walkway?
Actually, I do. I need to look at my list. I need to look at my list. When you repave Harbor Walkway, if we wanted to enhance the appearance of that in any way, for instance, edging the asphalt with pavers instead of just having it asphalt from building to building, is that something that the town could do in concert with you? Or could you look at adding edging of pavers and see whether that would fit in the budget to at least make it, if we can't terrace it, if we can't do switchbacks, if the town can do a railing and we can edge it to at least improve the aesthetics of it, is that something you would consider doing during the reconstruction?
Yeah, we can look at that and see how it impacts the budget.
That would be great. I'll give you my list.
Could you briefly go, I think there was mention of a couple businesses possibly impacted. I didn't understand which driveway. You said we're going to have to make some changes with a driveway up by, across from Rite Aid-ish area, Wood Street, when you were discussing Wood Street.
They're talking about right there where the slide part is by Wood Street, where
The Smoothie Shack?
the smoothie shack there.
So could you elaborate on what has to happen there?
Basically, we would build in that opening, that wide opening where there's no curbing, there's no, basically in that, any of our drainage, any of the water is going to cascade right across that driveway. To close up that driveway, basically we would build a 5-foot sidewalk, basically kind of like an island, but it actually would be a sidewalk. Narrow, short enough to keep the maximum width to get in and out of that driveway, yet also being able to provide an actual channel, an actual pathway for pedestrians. The curb also helps us with the drainage and having that gutter line. And that's pretty crucial from a drainage perspective.
Right here,
Yes, right there.
Yeah, I mean, I can, definitely, it just, there will be an impact to a business or two there with parking, and a lot of people pull into the smoothie shack, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, it's that something doesn't need to happen, but I'm just trying to understand how I can explain it, or has there been a discussion with the property owner there?
Doesn't that actually add parking on the street side?
Oh, right, I
Yes.
guess maybe that would, yeah,
One.
okay.
Still.
It's greater than 0.
Your eyes must be much, I have a hard time looking at this.
I also looked at it.
Oh, you looked at it, okay.
I looked at the small version.
All right, because I really can't see much. Okay, but we're going to have a copy of this, so.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, absolutely.
Anita Bercy Scott, going up to Union Street, taking a left, and going down to Pleasant Street, is, you said that has recently been, yes, continuing down there, that has recently been added to your job, but you haven't engineered or designed it yet. Is this a good time to give any feedback, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the design that I was looking at I'm talking about Pleasant Street now, which is the other side of Elm Street School where your pointer is now. Yes, that street. I saw an island being installed there.
That's not their design.
Is that not, that's somebody else's design?
Yeah.
Rick, do you know?
The island in
In
intersection.
Pleasant Street, yeah.
It's in the plan, the master plan.
It was in one of the pictures I looked at.
No, I got it. Hold on,
Okay.
let me pull this up.
Okay, so what you're doing on Pleasant Street is not clear at this time? Is that
We're
basically?
extending down Pleasant Street approximately 100 feet. Goes down to about where the end of the chain link fence is,
So,
where there's a couple utility poles right there. That's as far as we're going right there.
so you're, and that's on the grade school side, on the school building side?
Correct. Where the daycare is.
And are there any changes being made to the street at that intersection?
No,
The Pleasant Street intersection.
no.
Okay. Very nice. So, but you have a sidewalk there, but you have to, there. Oh, I see.
It's right here.
Right, so that's going to be
There's a sidewalk up that
That'll be
side.
curbed. And we'll actually have a sidewalk on the chain link side then?
Correct. This portion of the sidewalk, it's around 100 feet, a little over 100 feet, down to where these poles are and about where the corner of this is. Again, we put an ADA ramp in here, curb up this side, concrete sidewalk in that area.
And I guess I'm still not clear. So going down this Pleasant Street side, yes, that one, that will have a new sidewalk? No. Oh, okay, that's what I was not following. So it ends at the poles
Yes,
with a ramp.
yes.
Thank you.
I have a question about the crosswalks, where you're rebuilding them. I don't know what you call the rampy part.
ADA ramps?
Yeah, on which are going to be at every crosswalk. What is the plan for what is going to be sort of in the center of it? You know, in many crosswalks, there's a braille pad of some sort. What material are you making those out of? I know in some towns, they have sort of the very thick rubber ones, and in Rockport, they got plowed up. What are you planning to put in the crosswalk ramp?
Ours will be steel embedded in concrete.
Embedded in the concrete?
Correct.
So it'll be sort of semi-flush?
Correct. And they will encompass the entire area of the opening.
Oh, the entire, so it's not going to be just the square?
It will be so that someone can feel the detectable warning strips with a, somebody that's, blind or can't see,
Right.
impaired, so they can't get around the edges of those. Those will be wide enough so it encompasses the whole edge. And most of the crosswalk's 6 feet wide, so it's approximately about 6 feet. And they're 2 feet wide, and then the width of whatever we need to encompass.
They do, with the concrete around that steel plate, there's that 4-inch border, just to encase the metal in itself.
But since these are concrete, it's pretty much, we might do something around that edge, but it's all concrete anyways. On a bituminous
Something around the
grade-
edge like pavers?
No.
No? That was direct, Arel.
And actually, I mean, that adds some issues lots of times with the pavers in there, they popping up, exactly, and we prefer to have it as smooth as we can around those edges, actually.
Will we have any sort of design pictures showing us samples of what these things might look like?
I have a couple at my shop.
We can do that.
But, I mean, as they may appear at the size.
Jay this summer is, he's going to be working on a project right up in Waterville that he'll be putting in all kinds of those. I'm sure he'll be able to take some really good pictures. Those won't be concrete, they'll be asphalt, but we can get you some.
Exactly. Where did we just do one? Let me find a good one.
Well, we can get you some of that information, no problem.
But regardless, whether it's a concrete sidewalk or an asphalt sidewalk, it does have that concrete because we do encase the plate in the concrete. So that's why if you go to another community where, you see when they redo these ramps, that's why you see like that concrete border around, because that's exactly what they're encasing that. And basically that concrete also aligns itself with the face of the curb and that gutter line. So, from a design, when I design it, I think of that, concrete as part of the curb, that line. So it goes basically from curb to the concrete back to the curb.
Should we do it at the intersection of Park and Main and Rockwood?
We didn't, but that was a lap project. That was, what's that? 2 summers ago, last summer. It was actually last summer that one was done. Yeah, something similar to that. That's a good location to look at. Park and Main.
You know where Route 1 kind of turns onto Main Street?
Yeah.
We can get some pictures of that.
Yeah, they fixed where that crosswalk was, and they replaced the tip downs.
I think that one does have pavers around it, though, doesn't it? Does it have pavers? Maybe we want to see that one.
That project.
Park and Rockland and Rockland.
Andrew Stanchop, I'm wondering if any consideration was given to that part of the original sketch of the Mountain Street Route 1 intersection. Does that come into any of the scope?
What we call the Northern Gateway,
Northern Gateway. Yes, exactly.
not going that far.
Not going that far. Okay. Next time.
I just had one quick question. Well, up on Union Street, did you consider any drainage on that section you haven't designed yet?
Well, at this point, we haven't got a survey, so we're going to have to take a look at
The profile
where
of
the
the road.
water's running. Is there a water issue up there?
Yes, there is.
What's the problem right
Well, there isn't any catch basins on that side of the road, and there's one catch basin near the corner of Stop and Go and Route 1, or Elm Street, and the other one is over as you go around the sharp corner on Union Street. And there's a lot of water comes down Union Street because there's other issues up there. And then there's nothing in that area except for one on Pleasant Street, which would catch over by the corner of Belmont Avenue. So on that whole stretch, there's nothing where you put that curb, so unless you pitched everything to the next catch basin, the water would probably lay along that curb and the sidewalk.
We'll take a look at the grades through there and see what that's going to look like, see if there's something that we can do to make that work.
I'm just thinking from how that profile, whether it goes towards Route 1 or back the other way. And
Yeah, that's why you have to look at. It's fairly flat, so I'm not sure.
exactly which way we're going to go. And
It's so flat it collects, right? That's what you're seeing there now.
Yep.
We'll take a look at that.
Jeff Scott, going back to the corner there. Yes, and just extending 100 feet down down Route 1. That section has a mess of trees that split the school off.
Right at their fence line.
Yeah.
In or out of the fence.
Yeah, and are you going to try to preserve those? In other words, if you're making the sidewalk a little wider there, or are you going to stick with the back edge of the sidewalk where it currently is? Blah, blah, blah. I think the trees are right there along
whole
there.
idea throughout the project
Is to
was
keep that in.
hold that back edge of sidewalk.
Okay.
Just because knowing, if we do have some sort of cross slope and it does pitch out towards the street, we're able to maintain that elevation and
Yeah.
get the appropriate cross slope that we need. Because we drain the sidewalk into the gutter line
Yeah.
on the curb.
I guess you guys will be back as these plans develop any further, or?
Yeah, we can come back and have conversations. We'd pretty much like to do it with the town itself, if we could. We typically, on these type of projects, we do basically one public meeting such as this to gather as much information as we can, and then we pretty much go back and talk with the town officials from that point forward.
The reason I ask is I have some questions about sign placement. One of the things that our team is working on is we just walked Elm Street, looking at current existing signs, proposed signs that as they are in the master plan and how they work together or don't work together. At this intersection of Union Street and Elm Street, there is a cluster, particularly if you're standing up at the stop and go and you look down, there is a cluster of signs and trees and poles. And further down, there's a 105 junction sign. And I'm just wondering if the placement of all of those are mandated, or whether there's any possible movement of some of those signs, or consolidating, or making some signs smaller. That if you drive down Elm Street and you're at the stop and go intersection and you look at that cluster along that sidewalk area, a lot of those signs aren't that easy to see because they're partly masking each other. And further down by the Drouthy Bear, we have a 105 sign that seems really far away from the 105 intersection. So I was wondering, is there an opportunity to talk about that, or should I just give you my list?
Yeah, that's something that we'd have to talk to with the regional traffic engineer on the positioning of signs and where they need to go. But that's something that we obviously can talk to him about. It's David Allen, and we can take the list and see if there's something that he can work out. I'm not aware of all the rules and regulations for that, but certainly he can give us what we need to know about those.
So I can give you my list, and I could email you some pictures that I have that sort of illustrate it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Going back to the, Anita Brescia Scott, going back to the tree on the corner of Union and Elm Street. Presently, the walkway is asphalt paved and at quite a dangerous slope for anybody in a wheelchair. We're both on the Pathways Committee, and we've actually gotten feedback about that they found it quite unnegotiable. So we talked about making the diagonal. The question is, who would be responsible for actually getting rid of that asphalt and turning it back into a planted surface?
We plan on removing that.
That would be included.
Okay.
Because we replaced that with the granite curb.
Okay, so
Granite curb coming around the corner, that side of the tree would get grass, maybe that's a switch off between the other side, but, having a solid surface on the other side, there would be some somewhat pervious area on that side once we remove the sidewalk.
And given that you're showing drainage being installed around that corner, isn't that excavation going to affect the tree much more so than?
Stops right here.
Oh, it does. So the dark.
This project.
So the dark line is the curb.
It's the curb.
It's the curb. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. If there's not, I think we can come to a close here. We typically accept comments for a couple weeks from this meeting. As I said, I have comment papers right up here. My cards are up here. Feel free to take them. Email me. I make sure that RL and Jay get copied on everything that comes in so we can keep track of what's going on with the comments. After the comment period, we'll be moving towards final design. We're at preliminary design now. We'll be moving towards final design at that point. We'll be submitting our preliminary design report for approval with the department management folks, and then we'll be working with Luther's group on acquiring any rights that need to be taken, and the process moves on from there. And I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have any questions? Feel free to come up. Thank you very much.